Philip to Evelyn, November 25th, 1943. Sweetheart, last night at the time when I'm usually busy writing to you, I was on my way, along with the rest of the company, in GI trucks to that dinner dance I mentioned in a previous letter. We traveled 30 miles to the hall, arriving at 7 p.m. The girls, local talent, arrived shortly after, about 60 of them, all shapes and sizes, and running the gamut from downright ugly to downright beautiful. Altogether, there were about 130 people at the party. The hall, while rather small by our standards, was sufficient for the purpose, and attractively, if not luxuriously, appointed. 4 long tables were set on the dance floor. The napery was white and clean, and therefore most welcome to us GIs, who have been eating off bare boards these past months. The men were seated first, don't ask me why, leaving an intervening place for the girls, so that each soldier had a girl on each side of him. The meal consisted of pork chops, mashed potatoes, string beans, sliced peaches. The girls hadn't tasted them for about 2 years. Bread and butter, coffee, and those ever-loving sweet gherkins, and did I go to town on them. Our company cooks prepared the meal, and it was very tasty and appetizing, especially so because I hadn't eaten since noon, and here it was 8 o'clock. The floor was cleared for dancing at 8:30. The orchestra was a 6-piece affair: piano, clarinet, and sax, guitar, bass, drums, a GI crew from close by, but plenty solid. Of course, there was beer, plenty of it, and there was a grand rush to roll out the barrel once the meal, page 2, was disposed of. For an embarrassing few minutes, the girls were left to their own devices, while the guys clamored for beer and more beer. Finally, Overman, the one-man dance committee, noticed that the guests were getting restless and not a little indignant at having to play second fiddle to the beer barrel. So he hastily lined up the men on one side of the floor, the girls on the other, and at a signal from the orchestra, the 2 cues converged up the center of the floor, just walking and then running arm in arm like a bunch of kids. However, the ruse worked, and after a Paul Jones, the party became more congenial. For some unaccountable reason, I felt reluctant to join in the fun and remained a spectator through it all. It wasn't until a half hour or so later that I felt the urge to dance to the toe-tapping rhythms of the band. When they started giving out with the boogie-woogie, I couldn't resist any longer and cast out a roving eye for a partner. Before long, I noticed Klein dancing his expert brand of jitterbugging and clowning unmercifully and insufferably with a fine disregard of his partner, who was at a loss to follow his dancing and highly discomfited by his clowning. So, out of the goodness of my heart, and perhaps because the gal was a slim and shapely blonde with a sweet face, I, quote, rescued, unquote, her from her embarrassment. I can hear you saying, what do you mean, perhaps? Well, we were getting along famously until I tried a dip. No soap. It was so much Greek to her, and she wanted to know, what am I supposed to do? I was in no mood for giving dancing lessons, so I let it go and stuck strictly to business, which was my usual, page 3, sedate and simple to follow glide. She was a graceful dancer, and we got along nicely for 2 or 3 slow numbers. Then boogie-woogie again, but when I tried to swing into a jitterbug step, she shook her head ruefully and apologized for her inability to, quote, dance like you Americans, end quote, at the same time patting my cheek and giving me a little hug as a sort of peace offering or consolation prize. She was very sweet about it all, and so humbly sorry of her failing that I felt sort of guilty for imposing this newfangled step on her. In the meantime, my ever-roving eye, you know the one, had noticed with hardly any trouble at all a petite little miss in a royal blue dress. She was barely 5'2", but it was all curves, not too pronounced, a Cupid doll face, a toothpaste-ad smile, and a slender pair of ankles over tiny feet. To boot, she danced very gracefully. I danced the next set with her, but was again disappointed when I tried to swing it. It seems these English gals know only one step, and they won't be swerved from it. After the set with the Cupid doll, I retired to the bar for 4 quick beers. Here again, no soap. I had had every intention of getting high and having one hell of a good time. Unfortunately, the 4th beer filled me right up to the collar button, and it left me cold sober. I danced some more with another little gal with a stunning pair of legs and an even more stunning pair of, what's that polite French word for breasts? I forget. Anyway, you get the idea. To make a long story short, Chippy, I had the last 2 dances with the slim blonde I danced with first, and then got into my overcoat and went back, page 4, to camp on the first truck to leave. Altogether, I had a very pleasant time of it, and wasn't a bit sorry that I had gone. I hit the hay about 12:15, and when Corporal Schwartz woke me to ask me for the keys to the office, I looked at my wristwatch and it said 9:20. However, the hut was still blacked out and everyone was still asleep. This puzzled me for a sleepy moment until I remembered that this was Thanksgiving Day and a half holiday for us. Unfortunately, I had to get out of bed anyhow, if you know what I mean. So I scrambled into my clothes, performed my ablutions, etc., and went down to the office with Sergeant Suchosa in the command car. We hung around there trying to keep warm at the stove until lunchtime, when we adjourned to the mess hall. The meal was turkey with all the trimmings, and since I was plenty hungry, I did it full justice. This afternoon was a typical Thanksgiving Day afternoon, cold, windy, and sunny, and I spent most of it driving the command car around on various errands. This evening, I took in a swell USO show here on the base. More about that tomorrow. In closing, I will say what you have been waiting through 4 pages to hear. I missed you keenly last night, Chippy mine, and wished with all my heart that you were there so I could show my buddies a real dancer and the girl I am so very proud to call my wife. I didn't stop thinking of you for a moment, my sweet, and the girls I danced with only served to convince me that my Chippy is the girl for me, first, last, and always. I adore you, baby. I adore your baby and mine. Kiss her for me. Love to all from your Phil.